Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my January, February and March wrap-up. Okay, so I'm gonna be telling you about all the books that I read in the first 3 months of the year, and I'm still not entirely sure how many books that is because today is the 29th, I think, of March. So I still have today, tomorrow, and the next day to finish reading books, and I am like in the middle of 2 books. So I will probably finish at least one of them. So like if I do, I will film like just a short update and insert it at the end of this video. But it's like next week I'm gonna have it's gonna be busy next weekend. So I am filming this now sort of in advance because I don't think I would have time to film like a whole wrap up next weekend. So like if I finish those 2 books, I'll just film a short update, which is, much easier and faster to film, obviously. But so in January, I read 13 books. In February, I read 6 because I was going through sort of a reading slump. So I read like half of the books that I read the month before. And so far in March, I have read 8, I think. So far I have 27 books to tell you about. If I do end up reading the 2 books that I am currently in the middle of, I will tell you about them later at some point, but it will be in this video. So the first book I read this year was The Wishing Game, which was just like general fiction sort of, and we were following Lucy, and she was a teacher's aide, and she like really wanted to adopt a kid that she taught because his parents had passed and they had like a really strong connection, a really strong like sort of friendship. So she really wanted to adopt that kid, but she didn't really have like the means that the adoption agencies required for her to have in order to adopt this kid. And so then she hears that an author of like children's books that she used to love when she was a kid, and she also like introduced the kid that she teaches, like she introduced him to those books and he also really liked them. So the author of those books, he has set a challenge, and basically the winner of that challenge will win a prize that will like change their lives. So she wants to go to enter that challenge because it will give her obviously what she needs to adopt the kid that she wants to adopt. And so we see her like go through the trials in that challenge, like what she has to go through both physically and mentally. And it was okay. Like I never really connected enough to the characters, and I feel like in a book like this, you have to really care about the characters in order to care about the plot, because the plot was basically her trying to adopt this kid. So if I didn't really care that much about the characters, if I didn't really connect that much to them, I obviously wasn't gonna have like the best time. So it was fine, it was okay, like I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. So I gave it 3 stars. Then I read The Hexologist, which was book 1 in the Hexologist. Well, I don't know if it's going to be a series, a duology, a trilogy. I'm not entirely sure. I know that the second book is going to come out this year, but I don't know if there are going to be more. But yeah, this was the first book, and it is fantasy and sort of mystery. And so the book starts with like the king wanted to be baked into a cake. And then Iz and Warren are called, and they are the hexologists, and they are called to like investigate like what's happening to the king. And there is like some sort of secret air that maybe is like coming to light, and that has to do with what the king is going through, and also like a stolen object. And there is like a bookish dragon, which was so cute, by the way. And they are investigating. They figure out like the past. We learn about the past, and this one was very cozy, which like cozy fantasy, cozy mysteries is not really my thing. So this book wasn't my thing, but I love Iz and Warren so much, and like their relationship and like their personalities. I love them so much, and they are definitely like what's made the book for me. So like in this case, I really did connect to the characters. I really did care about the characters. Like I cared more about the characters than the plot, like the mystery. So it was not like my favorite book. It wasn't really, like I said, my type of book, but it was still a fun time. I gave it 3.5 stars. And like I said, the second book is coming out this year, and I do want to read it just because I really like the characters. Then I read Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear, which was book 10 in the Wayward Children series, which is a series of fantasy novellas. And basically in the series, we follow different kids as they go through like magical doors that lead them to other worlds. And in some books, we see them explore those worlds, which are my favorite books. And in other books, we just see them going through like different trials. And those are the books that I don't love as much. And this one I was very excited for because this one was a book where we were going to explore a new world. And so in this book we start following Nadia, and she was born in Russia, but she was actually adopted by two Americans. And so she, moves to the US, and she doesn't have an arm. I think she was like already born without it. Like she didn't lose an arm. I think she was already born without the arm, if I am not mistaken. And she like never felt like she needed, to have an arm or like a prosthetic arm. She didn't feel like anything was missing from her. But her adoptive parents, they are like forcing her to use a prosthetic arm, which she's not enjoying. Like it really bothers her to have it, but they are forcing her to use it. And so one day she like runs away from home and she stumbles into one of those doors that lead her to another world. And so we see her as she's exploring that world, and it's like a world of water basically, and there are obviously various creatures, like aquatic creatures, and there are specifically like really giant turtles, and like I love turtles, so I love that. But I don't know, it wasn't like, I enjoyed it and I liked Nadia, I liked the world, I liked everything, but I didn't like love it. It wasn't one of my favorites in the series, but it was still a good time. It was still very fun. I still gave it 4 stars, so obviously that's a good rating, but I don't know, I felt like there was something missing from it. I just can't really say what it was, but like it wasn't my favorite, but it was still a good time. It was still a good book. Then we have An Academy for Liars, which was magical realism. And in this one, we are following Lennon. And at the beginning of the book, she's like running away from a sort of an event. And she gets a mysterious phone call from like Drayton College. And they want her to go through a test to be admitted into that college because she seems to have like the art of persuasion. And so we see her like go through those tests, go through the trials to get into the college, and they are like pretty hard, pretty violent, some of them. And like it started off strong, like I was intrigued, I was enjoying it, I was curious, but then it just lost me as the book went on because first of all, I didn't really get the motivation. Like, why did that college exist? Why was it needed? Why, and also I didn't really particularly care about the characters. I didn't particularly like any of them, especially I didn't particularly like Lennon, and she was the one that we were always following, and I really didn't like the romance that was happening. And yeah, like it was okay, it was fine, I didn't hate it, but I also certainly didn't love it. And yeah, it was just fine. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which was horror, and in this one we were following Fern, and she was 15 and she was sent to the Wellwood home because she was pregnant. And so that's a place where people would send their unwed, mostly teenage daughters when they were pregnant, and this was set in the 1970s. And so yeah, she was sent there, and there were a bunch of other girls there in the same situation. And like at first it was pretty slow because we were like getting to know the girls, and like surprisingly I didn't mind it. Usually I don't really love slower books, but in this case I actually was enjoying it because I was enjoying to get to know all of them. And they obviously were going like through terrible times, and they had like no freedom. They couldn't really do anything that they wanted. And there was like a sort of like mobile library that went there like every 2 weeks, I think. And so in one of these times that it goes there, the librarian gives Fern a book, and like it's a book about witchcraft. And she and her friends start exploring the book and start being interested in the spells that are there. And they finally start having some freedom with the magic, and that was very fun. But then they also have to deal with the consequences of using that magic. and that wasn't as fun for them. And there were a lot of like very gruesome, very disgusting scenes that were kind of like traumatizing, but I really liked the book. Even though there were like some scenes that were really hard to read, like I really liked the girls and I was very invested in their story. Like I was really invested in the plot. I was really invested in how they were gonna deal with everything that they were dealing with. So yeah, I really, really liked it and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read Blood and Sin, which was book one of the Infernari. Again, I don't know if it's a series, if it's a duology, trilogy, I don't know. But yeah, that was the first book, and this was fantasy romance, and we were following Lana, who was an Infernarus, which means basically a demon, and then we had Asher, who was a demon hunter. And I read this for like my romance reading vlog, and if you don't know, I'm not a romance reader, but I do a romance vlog once a year, and I've been letting my best friend choose the books for me to read because she is a romance reader. And yeah, this was one of the books that she chose. And basically, like, Lana and Asher meet each other when Lana is trying to save another Infernarus that Asher had caught. And then, like, he catches her and, like, he takes her and, you know, things goes wrong. They both get in trouble and, like, they sort of end up saving each other. And, like, even though Asher hates all demons, there is something special, something different about Lana, obviously. And then they go, like, on a quest to find a portal that leads to her world. For different reasons, they obviously have different motivations, but they end up falling in love with each other somehow along the way. And I wasn't liking it, like, at any point. I hated Asher from the first page he appeared until the last page of the book. And Lana, like, she was just annoyingly naive, I guess. So I also didn't really particularly like her either. But yeah, Asher, I hated the whole time. So I wasn't liking it, you know? But then the ending was so bad. Like, this was the worst ending that I've ever read in a book, especially being a romance book. Absolutely hated it. I despised it. I hated it so much. And also my friend, I literally learned, chose this for me to read because she wanted me to hate it, because she also hated it and she didn't want to be hating it alone. So she wanted me to suffer with her, and I certainly did. And I hated this book so much, and I gave it 1 star. Then I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and this was fantasy, magical realism, and we're following Addie, who had been born in 1691, I think. And she, like, we're following her throughout her life, but like the present timeline was 2014. And in 1714, she actually makes a deal with a god, demon, devil, something, some creature, some entity to gain freedom, basically. And like, she does gain freedom, but also she's sort of cursed to, like, people forget her. As soon as she's out of sight, people just forget about her. So we see her, like, going through 300 years, you know, living like that. And then in 2014, she meets a guy called Henry, and he actually is able to remember her. So we, you know, obviously learn about his life as well and, like, what is special about him. And this was, like, pretty slow, but I actually really was caring about, you know, the characters' journeys. So, like, I was enjoying it despite being very slow. But I feel like I definitely like the first half more than the second, because I was way more invested in Addie's journey. And in the second half, we also learn a lot about Henry. And, like, it's not that I didn't like Henry, it's just that it felt like he was just more of a plot point in Addie's life than, you know, his own person, like his own character. So I was never, like, as interested in him because that's what it just felt like. So yeah, I definitely like the first half more, but I also did really like the ending. It was very interesting. So I did have a good time with this book. I was invested. I really liked it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Mile High, which was another romance book for that video. And in this one, we were following, oh, this is the first book in the Windy City series, I think. And we were following Xanders and Stevie. And Xanders was a hockey player and Stevie was a flight attendant for, like, his team, like Xanders' team. And Xanders had, like, this reputation of being a fuckboy in the team. And I mean, out of the team, like, everyone who knew him knew that that was his reputation. And for some reason that I I never really understood what the motivation really was. I mean, they explained it just didn't make any sense to me. He had to maintain that reputation, but then obviously he and Stevie fall in love, and this was like a struggle to read because it was so damn long, and like there was nothing happening that was interesting to me because it was literally just the romance, and I couldn't have cared less. So this was not fun. This was, like I said, a struggle for me to read. And I was just really, 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 really bored. And so I gave it 2 stars. Like, if it had been shorter, maybe it would have been like 2.5 because, I would be bored, but it would be like whatever. But this was like 600 pages of me being bored. So, yeah, like I didn't hate it with a passion like the other book. It was just, boring. It was just not my thing. And like, I didn't expect it to be, but yeah, I gave it 2 stars. Then we have 5 books of the same series, and so the books are Gallery of the Dead, Hunting Evil, Written in Blood, Genesis, and The Death Watcher, and these are books 9 to 13 in the Robert Hunter series, which is a mystery thriller series where we follow a detective called Robert Hunter. And these are actually like the last 5 books in the series so far. And they are like always very gruesome. They're very like violent, and I have loved like every book that I've read from the series. And so starting off with Gallery of the Dead, which was book 9, we start with Hunter and Garcia being called to like a very gruesome scene. And like the scene itself was actually very clean, which was, the first weird thing. But the like body was, in a very gruesome state. And then the FBI actually gets involved because they have like bodies, not really like in a similar situation, but there is like a message there is sent, like a mark that is left at the scene that is similar or like the same in every one of those cases. So they think that they have like a serial killer in their hands, and so they get involved and they like join forces in this investigation. And I really liked that. It was a very fun investigation. The only thing that really bothered me was that like Garcia, I felt like he was acting sort of out of character when he was with the FBI people, and I didn't love that. But other than that, I really, really liked it. It was a very fun investigation, like I said, and thrilling as always, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then we had Hunting Evil, and in this one, they were actually trying to catch like a killer that they had already caught like in a previous book, but they had escaped from prison. So, and like the book that killer had been a part of had been like one of my favorites before. And so I was very excited because this was like kind of introduced in the last chapter of the previous book. So I was very excited for this book, and it was really, really fun because like that killer was like sort of toying with the police and specifically Hunter. And so it was very thrilling. Like I was stressed. It was very thrilling, especially like towards the end. And I absolutely loved it. Like this one was definitely my favorite in the series. And it was 5 stars. Like I absolutely loved it from the beginning to the end. It was so good. Then we had Written in Blood, and in this one, like it started off in a different way because usually, they start off investigating with when they find a body, but in this case, there was a character in the beginning of the book that had like stolen a notebook from someone else, and in that notebook she found like descriptions of like deaths of murders, and so she sent that notebook to the police, and that is how they started to investigate. And so yeah, it was definitely like a very different sort of investigation because they didn't really have a body, they didn't have a person, they didn't have a victim. And it was very interesting as well because like in the notebooks the killer talked about like doing what the voices told him to do. So like learning about what the voices were was also very interesting as well. And so yeah, I also really enjoyed this. It wasn't I wasn't as obsessed with it as some other books. So I gave it 4 stars, but obviously still really enjoyed it. And then we had Genesis, and in this one, Hunter and Garcia are called to, another gruesome crime scene. And in this one, there is like a section of a poem, like a part of a poem that is left somewhere at the scene. And there is also a message that is sort of related to to the state of the body. And then they get more bodies with like other parts of that seem to be like from the same poem, and also messages that are related to the state of the body. and they are investigating. And I did like figure out sort of how the victims were connected before the investigators did, but not really like the rest of the reveal. So, I still really did like the reveal. And yeah, this one was also very gruesome, very violent, very descriptive. But once again, like I did like it. I did really enjoy it, but I wasn't as obsessed as some other books. And I also gave this one 4 stars. And then finally we had the Death Watcher. And in this one, we actually started off with like an autopsy. And basically it was an autopsy of what was thought to be like an accident, like someone being hit by a car. But then the medical examiner realizes that actually it wasn't really an accident and it was a murder. And then we have like sort of the same situation, kind of different, but still like in an autopsy. And that time was someone that thought to have like committed suicide, but actually realized that it had been a murder. And so we have, a serial killer that kidnaps and tortures their victims for like a couple weeks. And then when they dispose of the bodies, they made it look like accidents or suicides. So that was a very interesting premise. And as they were like investigating the victims, they found like things that sort of connected the injuries that they suffered while they were being tortured to sort of their past. So it was very interesting as well, like the investigation, and the ending like had me very, very stressed. And actually, like I felt like this book was sort of a bit slower because we spent more time with the victims and also like other characters. But I actually really like that. Like I saw some people complaining about that. And I mean, it was definitely different. It was definitely slower. But I actually did really like that. But at the same time, it was very thrilling, especially at the end. And yeah, I really like this one as well. And I gave it 4.5 stars. Then we have the 7 Year Slip, which is romance and sort of magical realism, and also for, that romance video. And so in this one, we're following Clementine. And in the beginning of the book, she's moving to her aunt's apartment after her aunt passed away. And like her aunt has always told her that the apartment was like magical and it could travel like 7 years in the past. And so, as she's staying there, the apartment and her in it travels 7 years in the past, and she meets a guy called Iwan, and he was like staying there 7 years before while she and her aunt were like traveling. And so that guy was staying there, and they meet, they spend a weekend together, and like in that weekend, she's like madly in love, and I guess he was too, but we were in her head. And so there was that, and then she sort of gets back to the present, but then keeps traveling to the past, and then they also like meet in the present as well, like her present. And it was okay, I guess. I mean, I didn't care about the romance at all. I didn't really like it. It was extremely rushed. Like I said, she fell in love in a weekend. But I did like sort of like the self-discovery journey that Clementine was on. Like I did like that, but I definitely didn't like the romance. I didn't care at all. And also like the supposedly mysterious parts of this book, like what were supposed to be reveals, weren't like mysterious at all. Like I thought they were extremely obvious from the beginning that they started happening. So there was that, but I mean, it was fine. I didn't, dislike it that much. I just didn't like the romance, but the rest was okay, I guess. Like I said, Clementine's self-discovery journey was okay. I was sort of invested, so I gave it 3 stars. Then we have At Dark I Become Loathsome, and this was a horror book, and we're following a man who has, well, at first, like a bit earlier, he had, like some time ago, he had lost his wife, and then his son had been kidnapped, like more recently, and he was obviously struggling with grief of all of that. And he like had started doing some sort of rituals for people who felt like life wasn't really worth living anymore, and the goal of the ritual was to make them like change their mind and make them feel like life was actually worth living and that they did want to keep living. And we see him like perform those rituals, and then he sort of like changes kind of what he's doing. And then he meets a man for like one of those rituals, and we learn that they're actually more connected than we thought. And I thought like from the synopsis that the book was gonna be more about that, like more about those men and like their dynamic, but it was really like more towards the end. So I don't know, like I just wanted more. Like in general, the feeling that I got from this book was that I wanted more. And I mean, it was very gruesome. It had very descriptive, gruesome, gross scenes, which, I mean, that's what I wanted from it. So, like, I did get that, but I don't know. I just felt like I wanted more. So, like, I did like the disturbing vibe that it had, but I don't know. I wanted more. So, I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read The Space Between Worlds, which is the first book in the Space Between Worlds duology, I think. And this is sci-fi. And in this world, there is like multiversal travel, and we are following Kara, and she does travel through universes, through worlds, because you can only travel to a world where your like parallel self, like of that world, is no longer alive. And like there are only like 8 or 9 Karas alive in like all of the, I think, 380 worlds that there are known. There are only 8 Karas. So, she's a great candidate for multiversal travel because she can travel to almost all of the worlds. And basically they like collect data from the other worlds, and then one of the remaining Karas that are alive actually dies. So she has access to this whole other world. And she goes to explore that one, but in there she actually discovers some like conspiracies and like secrets that are like connected to her world, like the one that she came from. And like those secrets can change the world, or like the worlds, like, or like the 380 worlds. And I really, really liked it. Like, I really liked Kara, and I really liked this concept. And I was very invested, and like I was very stressed. I was very worried because I was actually very connected to this character. I really cared about her. I really liked her. And so, yeah, I was very stressed at the end. It was very intense. Like, the ending was absolutely like action-packed. It was insane, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was great, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read Throne of the Fallen, which was the last book for my romance video, and this was like fantasy romance, and it was the first book in the Prince of Sin series? Trilogy? I don't know. I never know. And so we are following Envy, who is one of the princes of Sin, and he is playing like a deadly game to try to save his falling court. And he meets an artist that like he needs for a clue, and that artist is called Camilla. And then they actually start working together, and they go like on a journey to the underworld. And he thinks that there is like something different, something magical about her. And they, like I said, they work together. They are immediately very attracted to each other. And like, I thought that the mystery about her, like the magical thing about her, was very obvious. Like, as soon as we learned like something was like pretty early on, I would thought it was pretty obvious like what that was gonna be. And like, I was bored. I was very bored because this was like very heavy on the romance and very light on the fantasy. So I didn't really care. I didn't care about the romance. I didn't particularly like either of the characters like on their own either. So like, I was bored. I was not having a fun time. It was still like less boring than, for example, Mile High, because I mean, it had very little fantasy, but it had some fantasy. So, there was still something to keep me going, sort of. So it was better, but I still didn't really like it particularly. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read 3 books from the same series, which were The Blade Itself, Before They Are Hanged, and The Last Argument of Kings. And like, this series, I don't even know how to talk about it without spoiling, because like so much happens, and like it's such a big world with so much happening, like I said, and so many characters, and I don't even know, like I said, what is not a spoiler. But basically we start following Logan, like in this book, we start following Logan, who's like running from like some creatures, like non-human creatures, and then he meets a wizard, a magus, and he has like plans for him, has like very big plans to the world. And then we also are following like a guy from the Inquisition that is in the capital and works for the king. And they are like having enemies in the north, they're having enemies in the south. And there is like also, obviously magic. There is like a magic that is connected to devils. There are like heroes from the past that are very still connected to how things are now in the present, like the followers of the different heroes. And there is a lot going on, but it was really fun to like get into this world, get to know these characters, because like I have such mixed feelings about most of these characters. They're all very complex and very like I said, I have mixed feelings about most of them. There are a lot of things that they do that I think are awesome, and a lot of things that they do that I think are absolutely terrible. So yeah, I love them as characters, like very complex, very cool characters, very cool world, very cool like action scenes, very violent, very brutal. And yeah, I had a really fun time, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. And then the second book, I also gave 4.5 stars because, again, continue to love the world, continue to love the characters, and the ending got me like very, very curious because they were going on a journey, and the ending was not like what I was expecting or what they were expecting. So yeah, I also gave this one 4.5 stars. And then this one, it was very stressful. There was a lot happening. There were a lot of fight scenes, a lot of action scenes, and we also saw like more of the magic. And the ending was definitely very bittersweet. Like, it was not a happy ending, but that's really not what I was expecting from this series anyway, because it was such like a brutal world, a brutal series where everyone was, suffering, that I didn't expect really a happy ending. So I thought the ending like fit perfectly with this book, with this series. And so I absolutely love this one, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read The Night Guest, which was a horror novella, and we were following Iwan, and she always felt, when she woke up, she always felt like she wasn't rested, and that like her body was sore, was tired, and that she was really not resting through the night. And then she gets one of those like step tracking watches, like step counting watches, and one night she actually slept with it, and then when she woke up, she realized that she had to walk 40,000 steps. And then she did that like a few other nights, like sleeping with a watch. And when she checked like the GPS tracker, she realized that she was always going to like the same general area during the night. And that's pretty creepy. Like, you just doing something in the night, not knowing what you're doing. That's pretty creepy. So, it was a creepy vibe. I wasn't like absolutely loving it, but I was having a good time. It was creepy. It was fun. But then when we found out like what she was actually doing, I really didn't like it. I really didn't like the reveal. Like, there were so many other things that would have been better for her to be doing. So yeah, I really didn't like that at all. But I mean, I still didn't hate the book completely because it had like this creepy vibe that I was enjoying before. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read A Dragon of Black Glass, which was book 3 in the Moonfall quartet, I think. And this is fantasy. And basically, in this world, like in the first book, there is a girl called Nyx who foresees the end of the world, and the world will end by the moon falling, hence the series being called Moonfall. And after she, foresees the end of the world, she's actually given a death sentence, so she has to run. And while she's on the run, she meets 3 other characters, and we have a prince, a thief, and a soldier. And the 4 of them like come together to try to save the world. And then like we obviously meet more characters along the way who, join in the journey. And there are like some very cool creatures in this world as well. And one of those creatures are like meerbats, and like our main character Nyx has one. And we obviously, like I said, we see them on this quest to save the world. And like in book 2, we have learned a lot more about the past and about like prophecies. And there's also like a sort of artifact, but that is sort of alive, that is also connected to some of these prophecies and like past and also the future. And in this book specifically, they were like approaching the Dragon of Black Glass, and we also got to see more of this world, and like some prophecies were coming true, which was not a good sign. Like a prophecy that was, a bad sign was actually happened. So there was that. And in the end, they ended up making like some significant progress in their quest, but not as much as I was expecting them to, honestly. And now they got some clues that they have to like go back to a place that they had already been. And like at the end, some forces came into power, which again, not a good thing because they're like not our main characters, are like the enemies of our main characters. So things are going wrong, as you would expect in the second to last book in the series. But it was very fun. I really liked it. I didn't love it as much as the previous book, but I still had a good time, and like the ending was definitely very stressful, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Aeronaut's Windlass, which was book 1 in the Cinder Spires, I think, duology, which is also fantasy. And in this one, we start by following two characters called Gwen and Bridget, and they are both like entering the army. And one of them like did really want to go into the army, who was Gwen, and Bridget did not want to go, but she sort of had to for like, her family obligations. She sort of had to go into the army as well. And we're also following Grim, who is the captain of a ship, and he starts working for Spire Albion when they get into a war with Spire Aurora. And Gwen and Bridget, they're also like the army of Spire Albion. So we see them, we see this war starting and what they have to do to fight, obviously. And in this world, like, they're cats, but like the cats are like, they have their own society, which is like so fun to see. And like they have like people who speak cats, like humans can speak to the cats, which was so cool. And like seeing the society of the cats, seeing the thoughts of the cats, like being in the cat's POV was so fun. So like I love the cats. Everything else I thought was just okay. I definitely got more invested towards the end. Like I was enjoying it more, and there were some cool battle scenes like in the airships. So that was really fun to read. But overall, I was just okay about it. Like I said, I really liked the cats. I absolutely loved the cats, but everything else was just sort of okay. Although, like I said, I was getting more invested towards the end, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read The Fourth Consort, which was sci-fi. And in that book, we were following Dalton, and he worked for Unity, which supposedly was a like interplanetary association that claimed to want to just, live in harmony, like the different species from different planets, from different systems. They wanted to all just live in harmony, but that's not really exactly what they wanted. They weren't really that kind and good and nice. But Dalton worked for them, and he was like on a mission on a planet to try to get the, native species from the planet, one of them like the dominant one, to be part of Unity. And so he was there with his colleague Nira. But there was also Breaker. He was also on that planet, and Breaker worked for Assembly, who claimed to have the same goal as Unity, but they actually wanted to just live in harmony and help other species. And so we have both Dalton and Breaker like wanting the species of that planet to join them. Like they're basically rivals. And after things go kind of wrong, they get stranded on that planet, and they have to, sort of learn more about that species, their society, how they work, and kind of get involved in it. And like Dalton gets in so much trouble, like so many different kinds of trouble for like so many different reasons. And so we see how he has to, deal with all of that, what he has to do to get out of all that trouble. And like I said, he and Breaker are sort of like rivals, but at the same time, they kind of have to work together because they're the outsiders, in that planet. And it was so fun to see their dynamic, their sort of friendship develop. And I really loved as well to learn about the other species and the planet as well. And I especially loved the characters, and it was also like so funny. It was like very stressful but very funny at the same time. And like the ending was so cute. Like I was not expecting the ending to be there adorable, but actually I like got kind of emotional because like I said, I just really cared about the characters. I really connected. And like I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. I had such a great time, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which was a horror novella. And this one, we were following Mary Catherine, and she lived with her older sister and their uncle in like a mansion in this town. And they were always like just closed off in their house. They didn't really, talk to people outside, other than Mary Catherine, like once a week that she went to the town to, buy groceries, go on errands, that sort of thing. And we see like in the first chapter that she's going to the town, and that like people don't like their family, like they treat them badly, they speak badly about them. And then we learn that everyone like in their family had died. They had all been poisoned except, obviously the 3 surviving people, they had obviously survived, but everyone else had died. They had all been poisoned. And, obviously one of the survivors was the main suspect, but it was never proved like who did it, so no one really was ever like arrested or anything. But still, people in the town didn't like them. And then there is like a cousin that gets to the house, and it really changes like the dynamic of their family. And like, I hated him so much, that cousin. Like, I despise him so much. But like, that was it. It was more like just vibes, like no plot, just vibes. But I wasn't really loving the vibes, you know? It wasn't really creepy, it wasn't really scary, it was just sad, really. It was just really sad. So, you know, it was like I didn't hate it either. It was fine, it was okay, I guess. Like, it was okay because it was really short. If it had been long, I probably would have been like way too bored and it wouldn't have been okay. It wouldn't have been fine. But since it was so short, it was like 100 and something pages, it was fine, it was okay. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Shroud, which was sci-fi, and in this one we were following a group of humans who were like on a mission on a distant star system, and they were like watching Shroud. They were studying Shroud, which was a moon that like they had called it Shroud because it was completely dark. It was, you know, just black. There was no light passing through to the surface of Shroud, so they really couldn't like actually see into Shroud, but they were getting signals from it, and like they knew that there was life in there. And after, again, like in the other book, after things go wrong, 2 of the characters, Juna and May, they get stranded on Shroud, like on the surface, and they have to survive in those conditions that are really not fit for human survival. And they also have to deal with like a species, like a native species from Shroud. And like it was very creepy because, you know, it was just pitch black. They couldn't see anything, and like they had a couple lanterns, but like if you're in a place where light literally can't get through, having a couple lanterns isn't really gonna do much to you. So they had to survive in those conditions. It was pretty creepy, like I said, but it was really fun, especially when they started interacting more with like the native species. And like we got POVs obviously from the humans, but we also had like POVs from like individuals of that species, which was also so fun, like to see how they were reacting to the humans being there. And there were also some chapters, like some interludes, that were like sort of explaining the past and like evolution of life in Shroud. And that was also very fun, and I really liked their interactions. It was going like not like slow in the way that I was enjoying it, but it was like going slowly enough for us to explore, for us to get to know that species, you know, for us to get to know Shroud. And then I felt like the ending was so abrupt, it was so rushed. So I didn't like love the way that it ended, but overall, the book, I was having a really good time exploring and learning and seeing how they were all dealing with each other. And so I did have a good time. I just wish that the ending had been like not as rushed, but I still obviously really liked it, and I gave it 4 stars. And then finally, the last book that I have to talk to you, at least for now, is All the Dangerous Things, which was a mystery thriller. And in that one, we were following Isabel, and her son had been taken like a year before the start of the book. And he was, I think, a year and a half old, so, you know, obviously still a baby. And he had been taken, and she was, you know, obviously wanting to figure out what had happened to her baby. And she sometimes went to like true crime conventions to tell her story, to not only try to get people to come forward if they had some information, but also to investigate the people that went to her talks to see if any of them were suspicious. And so we saw her going through that. And then there was like a guy from a podcast that was like interested in her story and started working with her. And, you know, there were like, we also were following actually like her past, because there were obviously also mysteries in her past. And there was like a theory, I mean, there were 2 theories, I guess, that like one of them was so obvious that it was obviously not it. And then the second one was like not as blatantly obviously not it, but like still pretty obvious, that I thought, you know, it's not gonna be it. Then it kind of was it, like not fully, but kind of. So that was kind of, you know, disappointing. Like the reveal was kind of disappointing. And also like the mysteries in her past, like the things that she had forgotten conveniently and then suddenly remembered. No, you know, no. So yeah, I didn't really like the reveals, but it was still entertaining, I guess. Like I was still having a good time while I was reading it. You know, I was enjoying it. I was having a good time. And like it was fast paced. It was fun to read actually, but the ending was really not, it was not it for me. I didn't really like it. And I had already read another book from this author that I had given 2.5 stars. And this one, I'm like between 2.5 or 3, but I think I gave it 3 on Goodreads. So like I'm gonna go with 3, whatever. And so I guess this author just it really isn't for me. But yeah, those are the books for now. Like now I am in the middle of 2 other books. Like I said, I am reading This Book Will Bury Me, which is another mystery thriller, and I'm reading The Book That Wouldn't Burn, which is a fantasy. So yeah, if I do finish any of these books, and I probably will finish at least one of them, I will film like a review of them and insert it like right here. Okay, so I am here to tell you that I did finish one of the books, and that was This Book Will Bury Me. And this was a mystery thriller. I don't remember if I mentioned that already, possibly. And we were following Jane, and in the beginning of the book, she loses her dad. And so we see her like going through, obviously the grief of losing her dad and how she was trying to cope with that. And so to try to distract herself, she gets really like into true crime, and she starts talking to some people like on some online forums that like to investigate and try to solve crimes. And so we see the first case that they all work in and how they really get closer to each other, become friends. And then there is like the big case that is like the main case of this book. And this book is actually told 1 year after those events. And basically, someone has like told the story of what happened, making Jane look like a bad person. So she is now like 1 year later trying to tell her side of the story, like set the record straight. And that's what this book is. And so basically, they were investigating the murders of 3 college students. And they, we see them obviously try to investigate. We see what went wrong because we know from the beginning that things did not go as they were expecting. And we see them also like getting to know each other better, like the group getting to like their friendship developing. And it was okay, but I didn't love it. And I feel like this was more about Jane and her journey than it was about really the case. And maybe like this was like my problem because this was not what I was expecting. I was expecting more of a mystery thriller, like focused on really the case, but it really wasn't what this was. So it was not what I was expecting. And honestly, like I don't think I cared enough about Jane to be like invested enough in like her journey. So it was okay. Like I still thought it was entertaining and the reveals were interesting, were fun, but it was just okay, and I gave it 3 stars. These are all the books that I read in the first 3 months of the year. And yeah, that is everything for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!